Hello fellas, welcome back. I know this isn't a video essay, but I want to try something new. Actually, the truth is, I'm broke as fuck, and I can't find any jobs because employers are looking for grown-ass adults or people with experience, and well, I'm just starting out, so obviously I don't have any experience and these motherfuckers could care less. I gotta keep trying to get money though, and YouTube seems like the best option, but writing video essays is incredibly tough, and it takes a lot, and I mean a lot of time. That's why I want to do what Salazar Knight does with Batman and make videos about Spider-Man's history, both his comic history and his history in other media. That doesn't mean I'll stop making video essays because frankly, I love talking about the stuff I love. Cape shit is awesome, so I'll make video essays whenever I have the chance. I already have one planned actually, so be on the lookout for that. With that said, let's talk about Spider-Man. I always see people asking other people for Spider-Man recommendations, and they always recommend the same stories you can find on Google if you look up best Spider-Man comics. There's never a specific order, and when they ask for one, they just say Ultimate Spider-Man. It's annoying seeing people recommend the same Spider-Man comics over and over and over again, especially Ultimate Spider-Man because that version of the character isn't even the source material. It's an adaptation. It adapts beautiful and thoughtful stories from the 616 continuity so disappointingly. At least to me. I'm not saying Ultimate Spider-Man is bad. If you love it, I don't care. But if you're someone who wants to start reading Spider-Man comics, and if you want to know what makes Peter Parker such a special character to so many people like me, then stick around because I am going to go over Spider-Man's entire comic book history. It's gonna take me years, but I gotta try. You don't have to start with an adaptation. You can start with the original run, the Stan Lee and Steve Ditko Spider-Man run. Yes, I know modern Spider-Man fans think this run is overrated as all hell, but if you want to know how the character became as popular as he is today, then this is a must-read Spider-Man run because Stan Lee and Steve Ditko really created a relatable, flawed human character who's brought down by the world and the burden of being a superhero. As goofy and exaggerated as these early comics may be, they still told tragic and intriguing stories that I think newcomers should take a look at. Alright, that's enough stalling. Let's just start with the very first Spider-Man comic, Amazing Fantasy number 15. I am pretty sure most people already know the behind the scenes story behind the creation of this iconic character, but if you don't know, then quick recap. Stan Lee was about to quit the comic industry, but his wife Joanne told him to write one more story, so he did just that, and he came out with the Fantastic Four. People loved the book, so he kept writing it, and along the way, he created other iconic characters like the Hulk, the X-Men, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, etc. One day, Stan was trying to think of a new character, but he had no ideas. That was until he saw a fly on the wall, and he started brainstorming. He disliked the names he came up with, but once he thought of Spider-Man, he knew that was the perfect name. He came up with Peter Parker, a nerdy high school kid from Queens who was disliked by his peers because he was different. Spider-Man was a teenager. Not only that, but he was the main character. He wasn't a psychic like other teenage heroes, he was the focus of the story. Stan wanted to try something new, so he did just that. He told his publisher, Martin Goodman, about the character, but he wasn't a fan. Why? Because people hate spiders and no one would like to read about a dude named Spider-Man. Oh Martin, look how far we've come. Stan Lee didn't care. He co-wrote a story alongside his artist Steve Ditko anyway. Since Goodman didn't want to publish the story in the character's own book, the story was published in Amazing Fantasy and well, you know the rest. The story begins with a boy. His name is Peter Parker and he's Midtown High's wallflower. He has trouble finding girls, he has trouble finding friends, he has trouble being accepted. The only people that show him love are his legal guardians, Aunt May and Uncle Ben. They're the only people Peter cares about. One day, Peter goes to a science exhibit alone. He gets bitten by a radioactive spider. He gets powers, tries to make some money, and lets a criminal go because society treated him like he was nothing, and now that he's something, he won't bother helping those who thought they were inferior to him. Goddamn, Peter Parker really was an incel in his teenage years. This mistake ruined Peter's life. The criminal he let go broke into the Parker residence and took Uncle Ben's life. Peter is filled with anger, so he goes after the criminal, and when he finds out it's the same guy, he obviously blames himself. He doesn't kill the criminal, he turns him in, and the story ends with Peter reflecting his decisions. And as he's walking into the moonlight, Stan tells us these famous words, and the lean, silent figure slowly fades into the gathering darkness, aware at last that in this world, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. That was the worst Stan Lee impression ever. Holy shit. The book was a success. I mean, this story was loved by kids around Peter's age. They saw themselves in Peter Parker and they were fascinated by the tragedy of the character. Stan Lee wrote something thoughtful, something that connected to readers like no other comics have before. Steve Ditko also elevated this story with his art. He made Spider-Man look like a lanky creature. He made him seem like something people should be afraid of despite the corny outfit. The way he drew faces told us more about these characters than the words being displayed. His art had meaning, and people wanted more from Steve just as much as Stan. Martin Goodman was proven wrong, so he gave Stan permission to start a Spider-Man solo book. It was named The Amazing Spider-Man. So let's go over a few issues, shall we? The Amazing Spider-Man #1 is structured in 4 different parts. The first part establishes Peter's guilt, Peter's money problems, his school life, and his very first villain, J. Jonah Jameson. Peter tries to get money as Spidey, but since he won't reveal his identity, nothing is given to him. Jameson ruins his chances in the entertainment industry, and through misinformation, the public starts to loathe Spider-Man. Peter's broke. He has to watch Aunt May sell her most valuable things just so she could pay the rent. He hates Jameson because now he can't even help his poor aunt. The second part of the issue shows us Jonah's son, John Jameson, going on a space adventure, but the aircraft malfunctions, and that leads us into the third part, which has Spider-Man stepping in to save the day. Spider-Man seemingly wins. No one dies. He goes home and he thinks that maybe this would change Jameson's mind about him, but no. Jameson blames him because he's a little bitch. This part ends with a stressed Peter Parker questioning his morality. The fourth part has Peter infiltrating the Baxter building so he can talk to the Fantastic Four. He wants to join the team because he thinks that he can earn money that way, but after they tell him that being a team member doesn't pay the bills, he leaves them. The Chameleon is the master of disguise. He frames Spider-Man for some crimes, tries to steal defense plans, but he's caught by the police in the end. Peter almost gets arrested by the cops, and they seem to hate him, and this hurts Peter. The comic ends with him wishing he never got his powers, and this, my friends, is only the beginning of Peter Parker's constant angst and battles with himself. Oh yeah, how could I forget, this is also the first appearance of Peter Palmer. Oh, forgetful Stan. Nothing too interesting happens in the second issue, but this is the first appearance of the Vulture and the Tinkerer. All you gotta know is that Jonah wants pictures of the Vulture in action, so Peter gives him just that, which causes Jonah to hire him as his freelance photographer. Spider-Man and Vulture fight, Vulture goes to prison, and in the second story of the issue, Peter helps the Tinkerer with some stuff and he ends up fighting some aliens. Yeah, this part is whatever. But hey, fun fact, the Daily Bugle was originally called Now Magazine. Thank God that was retconned because it doesn't sound as iconic as the Daily Bugle. Now, onto The Amazing Spider-Man #3. I am very nostalgic for this story and I still love it. This issue marks the first appearance of Dr. Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, aka Doc Ock, aka the guy who wants to bang Aunt May. So in this story, Dr. Otto Octavius works on a radioactive experiment, but because he's a scientist in the comic book, this goes horribly wrong. The explosion doesn't kill him, but it does affect his brain and the experimental tentacles he created. Spider-Man has a fight with him in which Doc Ock calls him Superman and he wins the fight. Spider-Man wanted a villain who wasn't just a regular crook, and once he found him, that villain kicked his ass. And this discourages Spidey, but the next day the Human Torch gives a speech to the students at Midtown High, and this inspires Spidey to get up every time he's knocked down. He suits up again, and with his brains this time, he's able to defeat Doc Ock. The story ends with Spidey thanking the Human Torch, and well, let's just say that it's the start of a beautiful friendship. Moving on to The Amazing Spider-Man #4. This is another wacky issue, but it is the first appearance of the Sandman. If you've seen his transformation scene in Spider-Man 3, then I don't have to explain how he gets his powers in the comics. This issue feels like an episode from the 60s show, and I mean, the show is basically the Stan Lee and Steve Ditko comics, but I don't know, when I read this, I read it with the voices from that show and the silly sound effects. It's great. Oh, and this is the first time Spidey fights a supervillain in Midtown High. Why am I mentioning this? Because I love it when Spidey fights his villains at his school. I don't know why. In The Amazing Spider-Man #5, Dr. Doom faces off against Spidey. Flash Thompson and his friends try to prank Peter Parker by having Flash dress up as Spider-Man because Peter says some shit that Flash didn't like. Dr. Doom kidnaps Flash because he thinks he's the real Spider-Man, and when Peter finds out, he considers doing absolutely nothing about it. Eventually, he comes to his senses and helps Flash. This is another instance of Peter Parker having selfish thoughts, and I don't know why people still think Peter's supposed to be a nice dude, especially when he's a teenager. One day they'll see the truth, Andrew. One day. Spider-Man defeats Doom, he saves Flash, and the comic ends with the students at Midtown admiring Flash instead of good old puny Parker. The Amazing Spider-Man number 6 marks the first appearance of the Lizard. Dr. Curtis Connors is a scientist and a father. After trying to regrow his arm using lizard DNA, his experiment goes horribly wrong, who could have thought, and transforms himself into a giant lizard. Peter and Jolly Jonah Jameson go to Florida to check this out, and Spidey faces off against the lizard and his army. Spidey creates an antidote, cures Doc Connors, and returns him to his family. Peter shows Jameson photos of the lizard, but Jameson doesn't buy it, and he thinks the whole lizard story was made up, and he sees the trip as a waste of his time and a waste of his money. The Vulture returns in the next Spider-Man issue, and I'm just going to say this right now. Adrian Toomes over here is one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, but these early stories don't do anything interesting with him, which is whack to be honest. All that happens in this issue is the same that happens in the previous ones. Spidey fights the villain of the week, he gets bullied, and he has to accept the fact that he's gonna keep hurting himself and other people with the lies he makes up to keep his identity a secret. Oh, and there's this funny panel of Spidey writing Jameson, and this last scene between Peter and Betty is really cool. Too bad the relationship is going to deteriorate in future issues. In Amazing Spider-Man number 8, the students at Midtown High ask this robot thing called the Living Brain what Spider-Man's secret identity is. The machine gets arrived, but Peter tries to act like it's broken so no one finds out. Peter knocks the daylights out of Flash in a fight, Spidey fights the Living Brain, and Peter throws off suspicion of him being Spider-Man by telling everyone that Flash wasn't around when the Living Brain was fighting Spider-Man. If this sounds ridiculous, then you're right. Why did this happen? Like my good friend Comic Drake says, he's not really my friend. Because comics. Oh, and there's a short Spider-Man and Fantastic Four team up by the end. It's nothing special, but it does end with Stan teasing a romance between Spider-Man and Invisible Woman, which is weird because Peter's a teenager and Sue is a grown-ass adult. Comics are crazy, man. Max Dillon, aka Electro, makes his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 9. He's an electrical engineer that gets powers after being struck by lightning. He doesn't fall on chemicals like the Flash. Fate or some bullshit like that gave him powers. Again, comics are fucking crazy. In this story, Electro's just some regular crook who likes money. He faces up against Spider-Man and gets defeated. Sounds like nothing special, but really the central theme of the story is quite interesting. The theme is money can be a person's biggest motivation. It can motivate you to do good things or bad things. We see this in 3 of our characters. Peter wants money so he can afford medicine for his Aunt May, whose health problems have been getting worse and worse. He has to keep selling pictures of himself as Spider-Man even if it gives him a bad reputation. He's desperate for money, and we see that in almost every page in this comic. J. Jonah Jameson keeps making up bullshit stories about Spider-Man so people buy his newspapers. He fucking writes a story about Spider-Man secretly being Electro. It's ridiculous. Whatever gets him food on the table, I guess. Electro's a person who's driven by money. Before he got his powers, he almost let a guy die because he wanted a bonus. After he gets his powers, he goes around stealing banks and all sorts of expensive shit. We see how money can make people do horrible things, but we also see how it can make people do great things. It's a great message, and it makes sense that Stan Lee wrote this because he's a sucker for stories with progressive themes like that. That does not mean this issue is overly serious though. It's still a comic from the 60s, so it does have a bunch of ridiculous shit. I love it though, so whatever. This issue also offers us hilarious panels like this one. Man, I just love this guy's quips. And it also progresses Peter and Betty's relationship. By the final act, we find out that Betty dropped out of high school and broke contact with someone who got himself into lots of trouble. She questions her feelings for Peter because the last thing she wants is to be with a guy who has similar problems to someone from her past. We will find out who that guy is soon enough. In The Amazing Spider-Man number 10, Peter faces off against the Enforcers and their leader, the Big Man. No, he's not Tombstone like in the Spectacular Spider-Man show. He's this dude named Frederick Foswell. He makes his first appearance in this, so the reveal isn't anything shocking. Stan plays it out like it is, but it really isn't. Foswell will return in the future though, and he will get better. The only major thing that happens in this is Betty's struggle to keep being in a relationship with Peter because she blames herself for almost getting Peter killed. The issue actually ends with Betty leaving New York. Peter's left alone and worried while Betty's trying to figure herself out in Pennsylvania. This is also the first time we see Spider-Man's face replace his guy, so that's pretty cool. In the next issue, we'll find out more about Betty and we'll find out who the secret man from her past is. And by the next issue, I also mean the next video. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I really hope some people read these comics after this video. They may be goofy, and they may contain a lot of words because Stan Lee likes words, but they're fucking amazing. I can't wait to cover more of the Lee and Ditko era in the next video, and I can't wait to work on future videos because I love Spider-Man, and I want to help you find your love for Spider-Man. If I fail, then oh well, I tried. That's all I got for you today, true believers. Till next time, from your friendly neighborhood rusher, Excelsior.